Mace Windu was born 72 years before the Battle of Yavin to the planet Ulic Qel. Like most Jedi, he was taken into the Order at a young age, though he was taken in much earlier than most, at the age of 6 months, as a result of him being orphaned. He went on to train under Master Yoda, becoming one of the Order's most accomplished duelists and one of its most powerful members, second only to the Grand Master himself. Throughout his time as a Jedi Master, Mace took on 5 Padawans, each with varying degrees of success. Windu's achievements in life included his creating of a variation on the dangerous 7th form of lightsaber combat, which he created as an answer to his own inner darkness and love of a good fight. In addition, he was also proclaimed the Master of the Order. When the Clone Wars broke out in 22 BBY, Mace took up a position as a High General and led forces to several great victories. However, even the tenacious Master Windu was tested by the flames of war, and he was forced to battle those he had once called friends. Yet Mace persevered and stayed loyal to the Republic and his Jedi beliefs. After 3 years of grueling conflict, Anakin Skywalker would reveal his discovery of Chancellor Palpatine being the current Dark Lord of the Sith. Mace took a handful of the Order's most legendary masters to confront this newly revealed Sith Lord. Despite the Dark Lord easily dispatching all of his colleagues, Mace was eventually able to disarm the Dark Lord. However, before he could finish the job, the conflicted Skywalker intervened, severing Windu's sword hand, which was followed by Sidious unleashing his full power on the helpless Jedi Master, which marked the beginning of the Jedi's extinction through Order 66. Mace Windu was an incredibly principled Jedi and a true servant of peace. He was easily one of the most legendary Jedi that the Order has ever produced. Approximately 4 millennia before the Battle of Yavin, 2 young prodigies of the Force were born to the Jedi Master Untitled Qel-Droma on the planet of Alderaan. Their names were Ulic and Qel. These 2 prospects would undergo the tutelage of the esteemed Jedi Master Arca-Jeth within his Jedi Praxium on the planet of Arcania. Dispatched to quell a dispute between the royal family of Alderaan and the Beast Riders, the Jedi discovered that the royals were in fact dedicated servants of the dark side, Queen Aminoa being a descendant of Freedad Nad. Eventually, with the aid of their master, the young talents of the Order were able to push back and defeat the dark side cultists after an immense battle broke out. However, it was here that Ulic would first taste the temptations of the dark side, and his destiny grew ever more dark as a result. After his master was killed by the Krath, Ulic became hungry for revenge, and attempted to destroy the Sith worshippers from within. His efforts proved futile, and his final steps to fully embracing the dark side had been taken. Now the leader of the Krath, Ulic came into a brief conflict with Exar Kun, another talented Jedi who had gone rogue and fallen to the dark side. Their conflict would be interrupted by a band of ancient Sith spirits, who appointed Kun as the new Dark Lord of the Sith, and Ulic his apprentice. With their forces combined, the Brotherhood of the Sith waged a vicious war on the Jedi and the Republic for 2 years, which all but devastated the galaxy. Ulic's rage was felt throughout the galaxy by all, but by none more so than his brother, whom he killed in a fit of rage on the planet of Osis. In response, Nomi Sunrider, Ulic's former lover, severed his connection to the Force, blinding him from ever touching its power again. The grief-stricken Qel-Droma revealed Exar Kun's fortress to the Jedi, and the war was finally ceased. Ulic spent the final decade of his life on the icy world of Ren Var. There he was discovered by the young and ambitious Vima Sunrider. Taking this as his last possible opportunity to do something right, Ulic agreed to train Vima as Jedi. Towards the end of his life, Ulic was confronted by the Jedi Knight Silvar. Blaming Ulic for her mate's death after he joined Ulic's dark forces, Silvar attempted to murder the war criminal. After convincing Silvar to let go of her hate, Ulic was shot by the spacer Hoggan. Ulic died in Vima's arms, but vanished from the plane of existence, having redeemed himself of his past crimes, and transcended the physical plane as a Force spirit. Ulic Qel-Droma's effect on the Jedi and the galaxy as a whole remained influential for millennia to come. To set the ground rules for this match, we will be observing Windu during the events of Revenge of the Sith. However, we will not be analysing Windu during his battle with Sidious, and instead be looking at his character at the beginning of the movie. We will also be including his appearances in both the current canon and Legends continuity. For Ulic, we'll be observing him towards the end of the Great Sith War, during his battle with his brother, when he is at his height in regards to his dueling skill and power. Now let's jump right in.
Round 1.
At the age of 53, Mace was outside his natural prime. However, his deep engrossment to the Force essentially negated this fact entirely. As a male Karoon, Mace is genetically identical to humans in every way, the only difference being that Karoons are all Force sensitive, specifically the dark side, which we will discuss more thoroughly later. Mace was able to apply his strength to the point where he could nonchalantly crumple the armour of battle droids, as well as being able to break free from a Gundark's grip. However, Mace's strength in combat was not only shown through his refined muscle power, but also his fortitude. Mace has survived near point-blank explosions with little sign of injury, has endured multi-story falls, and most notably, during his mission to Ulic Qel, endured several days worth of sleep deprivation, and maintained a lengthy duel with his former apprentice Deepa Billaba, despite also receiving several glancing blows from her lightsaber, along with a gaping wound across his neck and a stab wound to the abdomen. Yet he persevered for the majority of the fight. Most of all, Windu is most well known for his combative speed. Through a combination of anticipation and reflex, Mace has evaded point-blank blaster fire, moving so fast that he is barely visible to the naked eye. This is all included with Windu's ability to land several blows on Car Vasta, faster than the latter could perceive, along with his ability to deflect several hypersonic slug rounds. Given the intense physical requirements that were needed for his chosen fighting style, it really comes as no surprise that Mace Windu is one of the most physically capable Jedi the Order has ever seen, a culmination of his relentless martial arts training and his extensive combat conditioning. Ulic Qel-Droma's age isn't stated in standard years. However, judging from his depiction when he killed his brother, he was easily at the peak of his physical prime, likely in his late 20s to early 30s. His chosen lightsaber form, Gem So, required an intense degree of physical conditioning, given its focus on dominating one's opponent through the use of strength. As a result, Ulic's physical power was honed to the point where he could break out of metal restraints by merely flexing, as well as fighting as Exar Kun's equal, not just as a duelist, but as his physical equal, matching Kun's own Force-augmented strength, a rather significant showing, considering the fact that Kun was able to clash his lightsaber with enough force to be heard for kilometers away. Even as a young knight, Ulic was already capable of appearing as a blur in the midst of combat, so much so that he was able to effectively overcome the Dark Warrior Warb Null, whilst having his energy sapped away by a darkside nexus created by King Omen, and a barrier of dark energy given off by Null. Not only that, but he was able to deflect a large quantity of blaster fire, despite also carrying his injured brother on his shoulder, ensuring that none of the bolts made their mark. If Ulic's endurance has a limit, it isn't known, perhaps not even to Ulic himself. Upon his initial fall to the dark side, Ulic withstood hours of torture from the Krath, resisting their attempts to break him, and upon being injected with the Sith poison, he mustered up enough power to blast apart his restraint column. This will to resist such debilitation has been a part of Qel-Droma's spirit his whole life. During his exile, and whilst he was completely severed from the Force, Ulic survived being buried beneath a massive snowfall and held out for days, surviving purely through his will to live. And finally, it is stated in the Darkside sourcebook that Ulic and Exar Kun could have fought for hours before their conflict ended, inciting incredible levels of endurance. All of these demonstrations have been shown while Ulic Qel-Droma was yet to achieve his highest of strength in the Force, or while he was completely unable to call upon its power for aid. So one can only imagine the amounts of physical punishment that this war criminal could take and dish out when at his highest in power. Through rigorous training and unrelenting wartime experience, Windu and Qel-Droma were honed into physical powerhouses, capable of outperforming the vast majority of combatants, to the point where they possessed very similar physical characteristics. Mace has been known to break droid alloy with his might, but Ulic has matched the strength of someone who has strength accomplishments comparable to Mace. Windu has fought through some debilitating torment, yet Ulic has withstood some punishment that would bring down a great many Force users, whilst nowhere near his full power, or even without it. While I can see an argument for Mace being faster, considering how well Ulic's other achievements in the physical realm speak to his affinity for physical augmentation, I doubt this would be enough for Mace to outmaneuver Ulic for the majority of a fight. And considering how well he has performed in the past, despite being in circumstances that hindered his ability, I'd argue that he could keep pace with Mace for the majority of, if not the entirety of a fight. So with this in mind, there will be no edge given to either opponent for their physical attributes.
Round 2.
One of the most highly respected lightsaber duelists that the Jedi Order has ever produced, Mace Windu was regarded as the greatest battlefield warrior of his time. He is most commonly known to be second only to Master Yoda in all aspects, and the rival to the legendary fencer Count Dooku.
We've not seen Mace fight yet, and we know that he's second only to Yoda.
At the time of Dark Rendezvous, Mace was perhaps the only Jedi besides Yoda who could possibly match the infamous Swordmaster in a lightsaber duel. All of these accolades hold Mace in astoundingly high esteem. However, he had far more than just a reputation to back this up. As a man who loved a good fight, Windu spent a vast amount of his time honing his dueling prowess. Along with fellow Swordmaster Sora Bulk, Mace was known to have created a variation of Juyo named Vaapad, which to him was the completed version of Form 7. Form 7 was the most difficult form to master, especially for a Jedi, as it requires one to draw on their inner darkness and use their raw emotions to fuel their attacks. The Ferocity form was characterized for its unrelenting focus on overwhelming one's opponent through direct yet unpredictable attacks, requiring a great amount of physical and mental discipline to use effectively. However, given its intense requirements, a Juyo practitioner is required to possess advanced skills in several other lightsaber forms. Considered to have mastered several forms of lightsaber combat, Mace was perfectly capable of operating in a variety of roles, ranging from the unrelenting aggressor to the subtle defender. The main misconception with Mace's chosen fighting style is that it is seen as some trump card that can be just exploited against any aggressive Darksider. However, the problem with this is that his fight with Sidious was the first and only time it's been used successfully. And as he has also stated in the past, Vaapad is a state of mind. It requires Windu to have the correct motivational boost to properly help channel such inner darkness. When he fought Sidious, he's just found out that he'd been fighting a war and witnessed friends dying for the gain of his enemy. This level of motivation is outside Windu's typical mindset, and since we're observing him at the beginning of the movie, this won't factor in. Aside from his skills as a duelist, Mace has also mastered the aspects of unarmed combat, having dispatched several battle droids with his bare hands, and going toe-to-toe with Cal Vaster. Overall, Mace Windu is one of the finest swordsmen the Jedi Order has ever produced throughout the course of its history, a man who takes pride in overcoming every obstacle in his path, and destroying them through his undying and unrelenting assault. Regarded as one of the greatest Jedi of his time, much of Ulic Qel-Droma's praise was derived from his skill with the lightsaber, having mastered this art of fighting in short order. Specializing in the fifth form of lightsaber combat, Xian and Ijemso, Ulic became an exceedingly domineering opponent to face. The Perseverance form was intended to bring the fight to the enemy, utilizing counterattacks and seizing the opportunity to disable one's opponent, having been built from the defensive form 3, and as a result, a more well-rounded fighting style overall. Through his intense dedication and competitive spirit, Ulic took Gemso to a legendary level, using his rigorously powerful mix of attack and defense to enable him to stalemate Exar Kun himself in live combat. Exar Kun himself was held in high esteem as being the greatest student of the infamous combat instructor Vodo Siask Bas, and one of the greatest swordsmen of the time. Throughout his various showings, Ulic has also demonstrated his ability to unleash a flurry of attacks through the use of overwhelming speed and acrobatics, proficiently compensating for Form 5's lack of mobility, likely through some additional training in the 4th form, Ataru. When facing off against the Dark Warrior, Warp Null, Ulic was able to unleash such an offensive despite having his energy and focus sapped away by Null's aura of uneasiness and King Omin's dark energies. Even as an exile, Ulic kept his skills sharp, not only training Rima Sunrider, but also fending off an angered Silvar, another Jedi who was both well respected for his skills as a combatant, and seeking to destroy him. Fighting purely defensively and trying to reason with the Cathar, Ulic showed his unwillingness to retaliate, implying that he was holding back throughout this engagement, making this showing all the more impressive. Whether fueled by his rage or burdened by his guilt, Ulic Qel-Droma remained a fierce practitioner of lightsaber combat, a walking definition of warrior. Considering the fact that Vapad has only been successfully used once by Windu after he was in the right state of mind to use his fighting style effectively, I doubt his ability to channel his opponent's inner darkness will be anywhere near a substantial benefit against Ulic as it was against Palpatine. While it could be argued that Ulic's use of Form 5 would prove useful for exploiting Form 7's weakness to counterattack, considering how well Mace has covered his bases, I doubt this would amount to much either. Given the extensive experience these combatants have, and the standard to which they performed, I would argue that Ulic is definitely fair competition for Mace. However, Mace's showings are more consistently shown throughout his time, and given how well he was able to overcome figures such as Ventress and Bulk, and fight as Dooku's equal, I'd argue his greater unrelenting ferocity and his higher performance would be enough to overcome any form of advantage that Ulic may attempt to press, however large or minute this gap may be. Mace Windu is awarded the edge as a lightsaber duelist.
Round 3.
Mace Windu was one of the most revered practitioners of the Force, considered to be second only to Grandmaster Yoda himself. In keeping with his enthusiasm for combat, Mace's most profound ability came from his mastery of telekinesis. Windu could employ this power to completely thrash his opponents and surroundings, and he has made use of massive force waves to blast back dozens of battle droids, and that is both by himself and also whilst working in tandem with Master Yoda. He further demonstrated this ability through his manipulation of heavy objects, collapsing a large gate and pushing a tank off a cliff. At the conclusion of his battle with Sora Bulk, he employed a basic telekinetic shove that was powerful enough to incapacitate his weak-way counterpart. He also did the same thing to Quinlan Vos at the conclusion of a sparring match, showcasing just how effective his attacks were against fellow Force users. In keeping with his natural affinity for dark side abilities, Mace occasionally made use of the Force Crush ability. Within the Clone Wars Micro series, it was this ability's devastating effect that gave General Grievous his infamous cough as the Jedi Master crushed his chest. In addition, Mace was adept in the use of healing techniques, Force Cloak and moderate telepathy, although he never really makes use of these abilities in battle. Master Windu has also been accredited with the ability to wield Force Deflection, adding a degree of defensive ability. This ability grants those who are skilled enough to block things such as blaster bolts, fire, electrical discharges, lightsaber blades, etc. However, we have no indication as to how advanced Mace's skill with this technique is. That said, The Jedi path does make note that deflecting blaster bolts is the minimum degree that a Force user could wield this power for combative purpose, so we can use that to imply that this is within the scope of Windu's ability, but beyond that, any other use of it would be entirely speculative. Lastly is Windu's signature power, Shatterpoint. This ability grants those few who are able to wield it with intense clarity and can aid in their ability to perceive weaknesses in all things. However, this ability's usefulness is often overestimated and misunderstood. The only time Mace has been documented in successfully using this ability in the middle of a heated fight was his defeat of Jango Fett. Beyond that, it has never been acknowledged as aiding him in any of his other battles. Shatterpoint helps Windu and those rare few like him in knowing where to look for weaknesses, but it does not tell them how to exploit said weakness. That is up to the Force wielder themselves to figure out. All in all, Mace Windu was a well-rounded and exceedingly powerful master of the Force. He was able to make use of a variety of abilities that will be of benefit both in and out of combat. Their intense raw power will be a great threat to the vast majority of Force wielders. From what I can gather, Ulic Qel-Droma's Force powers aren't held in a massively high esteem amongst the YouTube community. In stark contrast to this, my opinion is rather high. And while he may not have a massive amount of exposure in this area, there is enough for an analysis. Upon joining forces with Exar Kun, the amulets that the Sith possessed were said to give both of them more power than the sorcery of Alima Keto, who, with little training, was already capable of casually disintegrating her targets. From his appearances, some of Ulic's most impressive showings are derived from his defensive uses of the Force. As a young Jedi Knight, he was able to fight off the dark powers of King Omin, who had been using his abilities to form a temporary dark-side nexus and weaken the Jedi. This was also shown in his confrontation with Warp Null, a darksider who had the ability to do something similar through the Aura of Uneasiness, which was bolstered through the dark energy given off from his alchemically enhanced armor. During his battle with the Mandalorians, Ulic was able to casually resist laser fire from Basilisk war droids, which have been shown to damage ship hulls and destroy starfighters. In addition, Ulic was said to have mastered the use of his amulet over the course of the war, to the point where he was considered to be one of the most powerful users in existence at the time, second only to Exar Kun. With that taken into account, one can only imagine what he would be capable of. In an attempt to gain a better picture of this, I turn our attention to Tot Danita and Lucien Dre. Tot Danita had demonstrated enough defensive ability and power to survive an intense heatwave, coming away burned but alive. Lucien Dre was able to use the amulet of Ludo Kresh, an amulet easily comparable in power to the ones that Kun and Qel-Droma had, to allow him to withstand a turbo laser bombardment of his estate whilst simply holding the thing in his hand. Why are these showings relevant? Well, Ulic is canonically more powerful than Tot, and has already shown some rather respectful defensive showings. Second, Lucien Dre, a dedicated lightsider who was using a dark side amulet, of which he had zero training in the use of, and wasn't properly attuned to. Ulic mastered the use of his amulet, to the point where his power in the dark side was considered tremendous. By extension, I'd argue that the aforementioned accomplishments of Tot and Lucien will be well within the scope of what Ulic is capable, to the point where he'd be even more successful in doing so. However, he was not only skilled with his defensive powers. After being tortured for hours and being injected with a Sith poison, Ulic still had enough power to completely break free from his restraints, despite the condition he was in, and this was before he even acquired his amulet. He has also blasted his brother and Tot Danita with a massive propulsion of Force energy, and utilised the deadly power of his amulet to unleash Force lightning against Nomi Sunrider. Both of these demonstrations happened before he had even received any proper training with his amulet, implying that he was capable of significantly grander things when he had reached his prime, especially considering the destructive power of the counterpart to his own. Among his knowledge base, Ulic knew how to use Battle Mind, allowing him to boost his focus and potency in the midst of combat, possessed the knowledge of negate energy, a subcategory of Tutaminis, and he even possessed a resistance to Force strain, having used it to resist the effects of the Force Harvester, or Dark Reaper, knowledge of which his holocron passed on to Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars.
Ulic Qel-Droma, you defeated the Dark Reaper during the Sith War. Show me how to stop it again.
Yes, I can teach you to harness the power of the Force around you, making you immune to the Dark Reaper's effect for a short time.
While he does possess other powers as well, these aren't abilities that would be applicable in a fight. To conclude, Ulic Qel-Droma's power on the Force was astonishing, possessing the counterpart amulet to Exar Kun, and subsequently the potential to reach a similar level of power to his master, which is what led Kun to acknowledging him as the only person who could challenge or rival him. I think it is safe to say that Ulic Qel-Droma is one of the most powerful Dark Lords the Sith Order has ever produced. This verdict is tricky. Ulic is the more knowledgeable Force wielder of the two, but this isn't what decides such a verdict. If this were turned into a pure contest of powers and abilities, I would have to back Ulic, given the levels of power he could be scaled to, as well as his greater breadth of powers to pull from. However, the Force isn't something that these two have been shown to rely on to a massive degree. From what we've seen, Ulic has only used his offensive powers when provoked, which might imply that he wouldn't resort to them against another Force user in a fight unless he found himself in a moment of disposition or some other disadvantage. Mace typically chains in the occasional yet powerful Force push, but given Ulic's abilities with his defensive powers, I don't think it would be enough for Mace to take an edge. Similarly, Mace's use of Shatterpoint isn't something that I consider to be a game changer, as we have few instances of it actually playing a part in the midst of battle. At the end of the day, I feel Mace's more inclined use of the Force's offensive applications are counterbalanced by Ulic's supreme defensive power. No edge will be given for Force abilities.
Round 4.
Both of these lightsabers are of a standard design. They each possess some interesting design qualities, yet otherwise suffice as basic. No edge will be awarded for weaponry.
Final round.
Both Mace Windu and Ulic Qel-Droma were seasoned battlefield powerhouses with some unique and dark aspects. As a final tally, I would personally award the victor a 6 to 7 out of 10 majority. Standing several meters apart on the open plains of Dantooine, the combatants gaze towards each other, sensing the immense power within one another. Without warning, both charge in, sabers ignited, fighting as a blur of motion. The relentless assault of each opponent is directly matched by their counterpart. There is no advantage to be had, and none taken for several minutes. Throughout the contest, the combatants may attempt to off-balance their foe, trading physical blows, but this wouldn't amount to much, as both have the resilience necessary to carry on. Same can be said for their use of the Force, Mace throwing out a telekinetic shove, but Ulic would resist the attack through his defensive might. This sort of conflict will only continue on further for an extended period, but eventually, through his greater unrelenting assault, sustained over the course of several long and taxing minutes, Mace's passion-fueled offensive will start to push Qel-Droma back, with Ulic finding fewer opportunities for a counter. Eventually, Mace's frenzy will fully overcome the Sith Lord, striking him down in a flurry of violet saber strikes. Tested by another worthy opponent, Mace Windu is declared the winner of this match. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the first Versus series of this year. While the Versus series may not be as prevalent this year, I hope that you find any and all matches done this year to be enjoyable. Until next time, may the Force be with you, and thank you for watching.